Today on Something You Should Know, medical miracles. People pray for them, but do medical miracles actually happen? You may just be amazed at what one surgeon found out. Plus, our addiction to electronic devices. It's created something called FOMO, or fear of missing out. Are we too attached to our phones and devices?
Steve Jobs himself forbid his children from having devices. Absolutely forbid them. So what did he know?
The position you sleep in may have a real impact on whether or not you develop Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or other brain diseases. And I'll tell you which position is best. Plus, work-life balance. Is this the ideal to strive for, to have balance in our work and life?
We tend to live our lives in extreme, and I think the idea of trying to balance everything up is actually destructive.
All this today on Something You Should Know.
Something you should know. Fascinating intel, the world's top experts, and practical advice you can use in your life today. The Something You Should Know podcast with Mike Carruthers.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. You know, when I was a kid, I promised myself that when I grew up, I wouldn't be saying things like, back in the good old days, or when I was younger, things were better. But back in the good old days, and these weren't really old days, it wasn't that long ago, so you probably remember this too, when you could get away from everything. You could disappear from the world, go away for the weekend or go on vacation. Maybe you'd leave the number where you would be with, grandma or something, but basically nobody knew where you were. Nobody could contact you. They didn't have the expectation that they could, nor did they have the expectation that they'd get a response. You didn't have a laptop, you didn't have a cell phone, you didn't have anything. You were truly unreachable and disconnected from the world. The good old days. Now today, all that's changed. Almost everyone is connected by phone, text, email, and we're connected all the time. To the point now that for some people, if they're not connected all the time, they start to worry. They get anxious. What am I missing? And it's created something called FOMO. And FOMO is an acronym for the fear of missing out. It is so pervasive that it's now a word in the Oxford English Dictionary. And we're going to take a long, hard look at FOMO because I think you may find that it's a bigger issue than most people realize. Also today, medical miracles. People talk about, you can always pray for a miracle. Miracles do happen. Well, what about the people who work in hospitals? What do they say about medical miracles? Have they ever seen one? What do they think about medical miracles? Well, a doctor who works in a hospital surveyed other people who worked in a hospital about their experience and their beliefs about medical miracles. And you will be amazed at what he has to say. Also today, what is your favorite sleep position? It's important to the health of your brain, it turns out, so we're going to explore that. And this whole idea of work-life balance, that's become a popular ideal over the last several years, that we should all have work-life balance, and that would make us more happy. Well, does anyone actually have work-life balance? And if they do, does it actually make them happier? If you believe that work-life balance is a good thing to shoot for, you may change your mind after you hear my discussion today on the subject of work-life balance. But before we get started, as the Something You Should Know podcast continues to grow, thanks in part to you for not only listening, but telling other people and spreading the word about our podcast. And one way you could help, if you don't mind, is to leave a rating and review of the podcast on iTunes. It really helps when you're launching a new podcast. And in return, you'll have a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card that we're giving away every week. We give away one each week to somebody who has left a rating and review on iTunes. And then what you do is you shoot me a screenshot of your rating and review, email it to info@somethingyoushouldknow.net, and you're eligible to win this week's gift card. Now, you can buy a lot of cool stuff on Amazon for $100 or take $100 off something really, really cool that you want to buy on Amazon. To be eligible to win it, just send me a screenshot of your rating and review to info@somethingyoushouldknow.net. First today, we're going to talk about medical miracles. Now, normally you think of doctors and most medical professionals as the scientific type. You don't often hear them talking about spiritual power or medical miracles. But one surgeon, Dr. Alan Hamilton, he decided to conduct a poll of several other medical professionals, and he asked them if, in their work as a medical professional, had they ever seen anything miraculous happen or anything that couldn't be explained that happened with their patients. And every single person he asked, every single one, said yes, they had all seen people who should have died, but instead recovered miraculously. And he then asked, well, why didn't they discuss this more openly? And the usual response was, well, because everybody would think I'm crazy. But Dr. Hamilton's conclusion, and this is in his book, The Scalpel and the Soul, is don't discount the power of belief, prayer, spirituality, whatever it is you want to call it, because medical miracles do happen. They happen more than people realize, and they seem to happen more to people who believe in something. And that is something you should know. And now, FOMO. It is the fear of missing out. It is this thing that drives people to constantly check their email, to check Facebook, to check their text, to check Twitter, because if they don't, they think, what might they be missing? It is the fear of missing out. FOMO is interrupting a lot of people's lives, and it has become so prevalent that FOMO is now a word in the Oxford English Dictionary. Maybe you've seen teenagers when they're walking down the street, two or three of them together, and they're not talking to each other. They're all looking down at their phones. They're talking to someone else, they're texting someone else, or they're checking Facebook, or they're doing something. That is FOMO in action. And this may be more of a serious issue than people want to realize. My first guest today is Casey Wallace. She and her husband, Brad, are very involved in helping people with FOMO. Their book is called Far-Reaching Parameters. They have a website that's interesting. It talks about all the work they do, and it is expandwithjulius.net. And so, Casey, tell me why FOMO, the fear of missing out, how is this even a real thing, and why are we discussing it?
So, we live in such an extraordinarily fear-based society at this time. It's getting deeper. It's getting more intense. The bombardment of it is truly affecting all of our lives and the outcome of our lives. And one of the new discoveries, or relatively new discoveries, that science has actually put a name on is the fear of missing out, or what they're calling FOMO. It's a very real phenomenon, especially for those who are truly addicted to the mobile devices and that are constantly engaged in an ongoing news feed. And unfortunately, because news feed tends to be on the negative, they're really picking up on the energy of that, and it's really infecting them with very low self-esteem and thoughts of true impossibilities. The fear of missing out phenomenon also has a tendency to feed our inferiority complexes, thinking that other people are doing more than we are. We aren't doing enough. They have a more interesting life than we do. Because, of course, people generally tend to post, somewhat of the exciting things in their lives. And if you're sitting around and you're not really feeling like you're doing much, or you're not posting much, it really amplifies the action of competition, sending our young people into deep states of depression, states of unworthiness and shame. And so we're addressing these aspects of fear along with others, helping others see that fear is and can be very much a distorted illusion, and that through active thought intention, you can create and shift an energy field or an energy perspective of yourself that is far higher than this, bring yourself back into balance and back into center, and have a more intentional, productive life.
So you would think, though, that, people checking Facebook and seeing what their friends are up to is just kind of a benign daily distraction kind of thing, and it's always good to catch up and see what people are up to, but nobody really thinks of the negative consequences of that.
Well, what's so interesting is you are absolutely right. As we all first kind of joined Facebook, it was kind of fun. It was a way to maybe have class reunions, get back together again, or like you said, distant relatives that you really have gotten lazy about writing letter to and things like that. And those things, you are correct. They can be just quite pleasant ways to keep in touch. But unfortunately, there's an addictive agent to it. You know that it is an absolute fact that Steve Jobs himself forbid his children from having devices. Absolutely forbid them. That he regulated the time spent on devices through his own employees, that contracts were signed to get into those agreements. So what did he know? What do these people know? They know that that they're very addictive and that they feed the subconscious and the altered ego state into unworthiness. And if you watch the young, they're just constantly have these devices hooked on. It's an addiction. It's that quintessential drug addiction, and the drug is fear and competition, and that's what we're talking about. If you're able to not have these devices regulate your life, they're not the first thing that you reach for in the morning. You can get through a meal without checking it. You can go to lunch with your friends. You can leave it at home and go to the movies. Then hopefully you have a far more productive and engaged life. But these devices are actually causing us to be more disengaged with our own personal life in a desire to feel involved with the broad outcome of what's going on with everybody else.
So explain again then, so I understand it, how fear plays into this. How is checking my phone making me fearful?
So if you feel that you aren't doing enough, everybody else has a far more interesting life. You've got to be checking on everybody else, then you are not having as much self-worth. You've lost your own focus for your own life. Again, a periodic engagement can be fun and whimsical and healthy and actually loving, sending loving messages. But a constant need, a constant craving, an addiction to it is actually bleeding you from your own focused point of your life and contributing to self-unworthiness. And science is going in this direction. The counselors are being fed with young people and people all around with depression. They're deepening themselves into comparison, and it's a real issue.
Is there a difference between the person who's checking Facebook to see what their friends are doing and how wonderful their lives are versus the person who's the one posting all the things about how wonderful my life is? Right.
Good question. The topic is the key aspect. Is it friendly? Is it lighthearted? Is it open? Does it become a concern all the time? You've added to your concern list. Is it important that you are projecting a particular image of yourself to everybody else? It's that acceptance. You just have to be accepted. You just have to be included. There's really no peace within. Going a whole day without a device, engaging in activities that help to amplify your own self-identity don't occur for you anymore. Everything is connected to everybody else. It's the quintessential need to be accepted. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is so many people come up with an illusionary declaration of who they are and their own identity, and it all comes back down to an unauthentic presentation.
I think those of us old enough to remember the days of pre-cell phones, look back at those days fondly where you could go away for the weekend and really be away for the weekend, that nobody knew where you were, or a few people might know, but you weren't being bombarded with messages, nor was there any mechanism to check on other people.
Yeah, thank goodness, right? I mean, it was vacation. That's vacation. There was no way that for you to be contacted, unless maybe your secretary called the hotel. That was way back when hotels actually had secretarial services, for messages, that might come in. And you're correct. People actually used to be able to disengage rejuvenate, and be far more peaceful, far more calm. There's no downtime for everybody anymore. They don't even down at night, you know. There's an upheaval of insomnia. It's a rampant occurrence, okay? The brains are firing. You know, the devices are still on. They're sitting next to your bed. Every time somebody's getting up at night, they're clicking their phone on to see if somebody has communicated with them. It's an addiction.
Yeah, and you wonder, as you look at the things that you check and the messages you get, virtually never is it something they couldn't wait till tomorrow or the next day.
You know, we used to always joke, this is probably the same thing you used to always joke about, you know, if you had children, or really any situation, if you got a phone call between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., it wasn't going to be good, you know.
Oh, right.
Most people weren't calling you in the middle of the night to say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. I just love you. I mean, you know, that was the dread time, okay? You know, if that phone rang, there was an emergency. You know, and there was something wrong. And now it's just the constant social hour. We say, how do you get peace? How do you get peace? You know, now our children actually make fun of us because we aren't engaged in our devices very much. You know, we use, probably like a lot of people this age group or older, we've learned to create those parameters. And actually, the devices are just quite frustrating for us. We still tend to be a little bit old school. I still write letters. People still write letters, you know. You're right. We don't seem to be quite as affected unless you have allowed yourself to become that affected. But we teach at Expand with Julius through our courses and classes how to be re-engaged, how to be fully back empowered and making conscious choices in your life, because everything that we've been talking about is a reactivity behavior, reaction. It's knee-jerk reaction. You see a post and you react, and you see a post and you react. I mean, if you look on those posts, you know, they'll tell you the time those posts come in. I mean, everybody's just firing their knee-jerk reaction at things. They don't give anything thought. They don't give anything ponderment. The brain of intelligence doesn't even have an opportunity to engage. Just the wave of emotional expulsion is exhausting.
Well, but seems like the bigger issue now is if you tell your kid, your teenage kid, that, you know, they can't have their phone all the time anymore, well, then the peer pressure becomes pretty intense. That, what do you mean you don't have a phone? Of course you have a phone. Everybody has a phone. Yeah,
well, actually, this is what we're going to say. We don't think that's the first concern. The first concern is the child themselves lash out at you. Okay? Go ahead. Try to take that phone away from your child. The reaction that they're going to have is going to show you the addiction. Okay? It's exactly like drug addiction. You walk in and you take the heroin needles away from your child and you watch them flip out. It's going to show you the need component that has developed, okay? Now, if a child readily says, you know, you're right, Mom, I think I have been spending a little much too time on my device. Let me hand that to you. I'm going out for a bike ride, and we'll talk to you later. That's a pretty good sign that there's probably not a problem, okay? But the first sign is the child's reaction. Forget them even getting to the school where everybody else is going to have an opinion about it. Most of the time they fight so hard, the parent caves in and gives it back to them, and they'll say, oh, it was just too hard to take it away from the child. And we go, really? Wow, it's a good thing they're not on heroin, because it would really be a problem for them to take that needle away too. So you'd probably just go ahead and slip it in their backpack for them.
Yeah, well, but the potential dangers of, and heroin is illegal, and the potential dangers are perhaps a little more acute than, you know, cell phone use.
Well, that depends on the studies that you're looking at, okay? It is absolutely true that these devices are putting out an electronic field that is activating depression and thoughts of unworthiness. Again, this goes back to Steve Jobs knowing that these devices are addictive, and knowing that at a certain age in the young, where their brains are developing, they can actually retard brain development. Development of being able to reason and manage through your own issues and problems. You become dependent on everybody else's decisions and the aspect of them taking care of you. So it really supports the victimhood role and the non-productivity. Actually, he's come right out and talk. Well, when he was alive, he used to come right out and talk about this. This is documented. These are in magazines and things of that nature. And the general public didn't really catch on to what was being said there. They kind of just tagged him as, yeah, he's kind of a jerk, because a lot of people have written what they think he was kind of a controlling jerk, in his home life. And we say, actually, I think there was a lot more wisdom and intuition going on there, but however it was perceived by others got stated in other ways.
So is the advice to go cold turkey or to gradually find ways to move this out of your life?
Good question. Of course it can't be cold turkey. It can't, because the world now operates on it. So you can't, unless you're going to live on a glacier, or in the Himalayan mountains, it can't be, you basically couldn't function. Our society has made it that way. Becoming consciously aware, accountable, and making rational choices. And this is challenging. It's really hard. Some people will write it, or we speak about it being a focus, a choice, or what we call a consciously aware state. Putting that device down and leaving. Making yourself do those things. And what's amazing is you'll generally come back and find that your world hasn't imploded. It hasn't.
I have a sense that people realize on some level that you're right. You're right, that even those people who are so tied to their tech devices and can't imagine living without them know that there's a price to pay for that, and it's probably not always such a great price, but think they have no option. So it's good to hear that someone is carrying the torch and saying, yeah, you do have an option. You can put your phone away. So it's refreshing to hear that. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. You have an absolutely wonderful day.
Casey Wallace is my guest. She and her husband, Brad, have a website you can check out if you'd like to get more information. The website is expandwithjulius.net, expandwithjulius.net. There's a link to it on the show notes page for this podcast, and their book is called Far-Reaching Parameters. Not too long ago, I was in Utah, in a small town in Utah, visiting the people at Boostability. They're a search engine optimization company that specializes in small business websites. And what they do, and they've got thousands and thousands of clients around the world, what they do is they help a business website rank high when people search online. When they go to Google and search for whatever they're looking for, they help websites rank high. That's what search engine optimization is. I didn't know too much about it, but I thought it was just something you added keywords here and there, and that's how you got your search engine optimization. I didn't really know anything. And I learned a lot about it. And this is a big operation. And what I learned is that search engine optimization is an ongoing process, that to keep your website ranking high, you need to keep working at your search engine optimization. And that's what they do, and they're really good at it. So what I'd like you to do, if you have a small business website, go to myfreewebsitescore.com and you fill out a little information, and you will instantly get back your free website score and analysis that will tell you how well your website ranks now when people search for what you sell, and some ideas to improve it. And it's the first step to improving your search engine optimization. Find out how it's performing now. So go to myfreewebsitescore.com and start the process right there. It's free. There's no obligation. You just put your stuff in and you instantly get back your report. myfreewebsitescore.com from Boostability. Work-life balance. It's the idea that too much work is a bad thing. You've probably heard that saying that nobody ever said on their deathbed looking back at their life, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. Okay, I get that. I understand that. But is work-life balance practical, realistic, Or does it just make people feel guilty for missing Little League games and ballet recitals because they had to work? Matthew Kelly is the author of an interesting book on this subject called Off Balance. And so, Matthew, what about work-life balance?
We've been talking about work-life balance for just over 20 years now. The reality is we're most satisfied when we're working hard or playing or resting hard. I interviewed 3,000 people. I asked them to choose between balance and satisfaction. Which would they rather? All but a couple chose satisfaction. I said, describe for me the most satisfying time in your life in the last 6 months. Most of them either talked about a week where they worked a 78-hour week, 80-hour week, and really pushed through a project, or they talked about 3 or 4 days they spent at the beach. We tend to live our lives in extreme, and I think the idea of trying to balance everything up is actually destructive.
Well, why do we live in the extreme? Why is it? I guess my guess would be that, when I'm playing, and when I'm working, and both of those can be good, but mix them together and neither one gets done very well.
Exactly. And if you say, okay, in any period, whether it's a day or a week or a month, I have to work exactly the same amount as I play, that's not going to work. We tend to spend most of our lives working, Mike. That's not bad. Work is not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but when we are engaged in our passions, when we are growing through our work, work is a really good thing, and I think it shouldn't be something that, okay, it's 5 o'clock, I got to cut off, I'm done. Now, obviously, the other end of that is people who never unplug, and I talk about this in the book as well. We need to unplug. That's part of the other side of the equation. You can't just be working all the time.
Structure for many people at work is they work from 9 to 5 and then they go home.
No question, but I think there's a growing number of people who are not turning off when they go home. And obviously turning off, when we say turning off, what do we mean? Do we mean turning our computer off or turning our phone off? But mentally, if you leave work at 5 o'clock, mentally, when do you leave the work? And some people are still laying down to go to bed at night and still obsessed thinking about the work.
Yeah, well, I remember having this discussion not long ago about how, when my dad came home from work, nobody called him at home, and he didn't have a cell phone in 1970-something, and, and he didn't have a laptop or an iPad or anything. So when he left work, he came home.
Absolutely. The average American now only ever has 11 minutes between an interruption, whether it's a phone call, a text message, an email, a meeting. 11 minutes is the average American. That's the period of time we now have to work with, whereas our parents had 2-3 hours to sit down, close the door, work on a project.
11 minutes.
11 minutes.
But many of those interruptions are self-imposed, right? I mean, if we had the guts to turn off the phone or whatever, we wouldn't get interrupted.
There's no question. And I think that is what, Off Balance is really talking about. It's saying, okay, what brings high levels of satisfaction to your life? What brings high levels of dissatisfaction to your life, or any level of dissatisfaction to your life? And how can we start to intentionally approach life and intentionally approach our days, our weeks, our months, so that we can live more satisfying lives?
And so how do you do that in a nutshell?
Well, first, it's very important, I think, that you identify your dissatisfaction. In the book, I have this personal and professional satisfaction assessment, and it's just 20 questions, and people answer, A, B, C, or D, and then it gives you a personal and professional satisfaction score. What this helps to do is work out, okay, what are the areas of dissatisfaction in your personal or professional life? In your personal life, it might be, hey, your marriage isn't where you want it to be, or it might be you're struggling in a relationship with your teenage daughter. In your professional life, it might be, listen, the job just isn't a good fit for you, or you don't really get on with your manager. But it's critically important at the outset that we identify areas of dissatisfaction in our life, because once that identification has taken place, almost organically you start to work towards creating more satisfaction in those areas. And so the first step is absolutely identifying that dissatisfaction in your life.
So satisfaction means different things to different people.
Absolutely. In the book, I talk about the difference between happiness and pleasure. Pleasure can't be sustained on the activity producing it. So when we eat, we feel pleasure. When we stop eating, the pleasure stops, which is essentially why we don't stop eating. We just keep eating and eating because we like the pleasure. We're not hungry. 75% of the time when most people are eating, they're not actually hungry. We just like the pleasure of eating, and pleasure can't be sustained beyond the activity producing it. Happiness is different to that. You work out, you're happy after you work out. You work out, even if you have to force yourself to work out, you're always glad you worked out afterwards. That's happiness. Happiness can be sustained beyond the activity producing it, and satisfaction is linked to that happiness reality, that happiness principle, not to a pleasure principle. The song "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" is all about seeking pleasure, and when you're seeking pleasure, you can't get any satisfaction. In fact, satisfaction is not possible without some element of delayed gratification, just as it's not possible to be successful at anything in life without some element of delayed gratification.
Well, it would seem that the people who are frustrated with all of this are the people who let things happen. I mean, I know people who just seem frazzled because stuff's coming at them all the time, and I also know people who are very disciplined, turn off their phone, don't check their email every 5 minutes, and they seem much more in control of their lives.
Yeah, having a plan is absolutely critical. And, I talk about sort of having a quarterly review for yourself. And myself, I take 20 minutes on a Sunday afternoon and I think about my week. I think about, okay, what am I really looking forward to? What sort of activities or meetings could go either way? And just having this 20 minutes to plan on a Sunday afternoon really sort of sets direction and motion to the week. Unfortunately, I don't always do it. I can always tell the difference between a week when I do sort of plan it out a little bit and when I don't. And most people have never been taught to do that. I mean, I have a really great life coach who introduced me this to several years ago, and that's how I got into it. But we do need a plan. Like you say, Mike, the people who just let it happen to them, it's not going to end up good because there are many different people, many different scenarios that don't have their best interests at heart.
Well, maybe sometimes people give up with the plan because life never seems to follow the plan. But I would think that at least having a plan in the first place helps at least makes you do better than if you had no plan at all.
Absolutely, and there's other people who say that, I don't want to be a slave to a plan and all this sort of thing, or a slave to a schedule. I don't want people to be a slave to a plan or a slave to a schedule. I want it to be a tool, a guideline, something that brings the best out of us. I think the best example is just having a look at a single day. One of the things I ask people in the book is, how do your best days begin? Do you know how your best days begin? Because if a day doesn't start as a great day, it's unlikely to end as a great day. Once a day gets away from us, and I think we know when a day has gotten away from us, it's very difficult to shift the momentum of a day. We tend to go into survival mode and say, all right, I'll just get through the day. Let's get this day done, and hopefully tomorrow will be better. And so, one of the first steps is working out, how do your best days begin? Some people that's for taking a walk. Some people it's having breakfast with the kids or driving the kids to school. For some people it's a workout. For some people it's, sitting down and planning the day. For some people it's different things for different people. But to know how our best days begin, because if we look at the last 100 days, some days were great days, some days were ordinary days, and some days were not good days. And if we really studied those days, we would discover that the days that didn't start as a great day never ended as a great day.
I wonder why that is.
Because there becomes too many influences in our life. There's too many people with too many agendas, and our agenda gets sabotaged or gets mortgaged to the loudest voice.
So clearly the concept of work-life balance seems a little simplistic when you look at really the complexity of our lives, and I appreciate you shedding some light on this. Matthew Kelly is the author of the book Off Balance. There's a link to his book and more info on the show notes page for this podcast episode on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. Thanks, Matthew. So what is your favorite position to sleep in? I know I have a favorite position. In fact, I've always thought that when I die, I'd like to be buried in my favorite position. I mean, why does everybody have to lie on their back forever? I mean, if it's for all eternity, I'd rather be comfortable. But anyway, it turns out that while you're alive, your sleep position is important, and kind of for a strange reason. The right sleep position promotes good brain health. There's evidence that sleeping in the lateral position, that means basically sleeping on your side, as compared to sleeping on your back or your stomach, may be more effective at removing brain waste. And it seems to be an important factor to help reduce the chances of developing Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other neurological diseases. This is according to relatively new research at Stony Brook University. Interestingly, sleeping on your side is the most common, and that's probably not coincidence. The researchers said that the lateral sleep position is already the most popular not only in humans, but also in most animals, even in the wild. And it appears that we have adapted to the lateral sleep position to most efficiently clear out our brain of this metabolic waste goo, or whatever it is, that builds up while we're awake. So if you don't sleep on your side, you may want to get into the practice of sleeping on your side because your brain will thank you. And please don't forget to leave a rating and review. Now that you've listened to an episode, go to iTunes and leave a rating and review and send me a screenshot of it. And if you'll do that, you'll be eligible to win the $100 gift card we're giving away to Amazon.com. Every week we give away a $100 gift card from all the people who send in a rating and review, who send a screenshot of it. And the email address to send it is info@somethingyoushouldknow.net. The podcast today has been sponsored by Boostability. If you have a small business website, you need to make sure your website ranks high when people search for what you sell. And to find out how well your website performs right now, go to myfreewebsitescore.com. myfreewebsitescore.com. Enter some information and you'll instantly get back your free website score and analysis to see how well your website performs when people search for what you sell. My free website score is from Boostability. I'm Mike Carruthers. That's it for the podcast today. Thanks for listening to Something You Should Know.